Story recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a horror, mystery, and thriller film called Autopsy. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Emily, a med school dropout, attends the Mardi Gras celebration in Louisiana with her boyfriend Bobby and their friends Claire and Jude. While enjoying the party, they drink and meet a new friend, Dimitri. Later that night, Emily and her friends get into a car accident on State Route 53. Dimitri and Bobby console the girls while Jude pees beside the car wreckage. Then, a bloody hand suddenly grabs Jude's ankle, frightening him and causing him to scream. Jude's outburst catches the attention of his friends, so they look under the car and see a man in a hospital gown. Jude gets closer to check his pulse, only for the man to spit blood in his mouth. Emily and her friends are arguing on how to help the man when an ambulance conveniently passes by. The EMTs Travis and Scott spot the group and learn that the man came out of nowhere, so they put him on a stretcher before loading him in the ambulance. Scott says that the man ran away from surgery, and they've been looking for him for hours. He also tells the group to go to the hospital since they were in an accident. Emily and her friends then hesitantly enter the vehicle, agreeing to have a tow truck retrieve their car. The man struggles to get out of the restraints, so Emily reassures him that they're almost at the hospital and that he will be okay. However, the man only gets even more scared and shakes his head. Moments later, Nurse Marian greets Emily and her friends upon reaching Mercy Hospital. Aside from Emily, the group enters the hospital while the man is taken to a different entrance. Inside, Nurse Marian asks if anyone is experiencing any dizziness, shortness of breath, or pain. So Claire replies that her neck is sore, while Jude says the man spat blood in his mouth. Nurse Marian then gives him some forms to sign while waiting for the doctor, and when Bobby notices that Emily's not with them, he goes outside to find her. Bobby finds Emily deep in thought, so he tells her that what happened to the man was an accident and that he will be okay. Emily sits down on a nearby bench, saying that she needs to prepare herself for the smell of the hospital before going inside. Because of that, Bobby comforts Emily, saying that she may dislike the smell, but she still needs medical attention. Then, Emily notices that Bobby is bleeding during their conversation, but he says it's just a scrape. Inside, Nurse Marian suddenly receives a call and informs Jude that an exam room has opened up. At the same time, Emily bursts into the room with Bobby, telling the nurse that her boyfriend is bleeding. Nurse Marian then approaches them as Bobby lifts his shirt to reveal his wound with glass embedded in it. Thinking that it's only a sliver of glass, Bobby decides to pull it out despite everyone's protests. However, the glass turns out to be a long one, and suddenly, Bobby starts having trouble breathing, causing his friends to panic. Nurse Marian immediately calls Travis, who loads Bobby on a stretcher before taking him inside for surgery. Meanwhile, Emily desperately tries to go with Bobby, but Nurse Marian stops her. Afterward, when Emily submits the accomplished forms to Nurse Marian and inquires about Bobby's condition, the nurse receives a call from the doctor. Nurse Marian then tells Emily that the doctor would like to speak to her, directing her to the 3rd floor. Upon arriving on the 3rd floor, Emily finds a room where she sees a man covered in blood. The man keeps banging on the door while helplessly begging Emily not to leave him there, but there's nothing she can do for him. Then, after further searching, Emily encounters Dr. Benway. Dr. Benway informs her that the glass didn't puncture Bobby's lung and that he will be okay. As they talk, Dr. Benway walks Emily to the elevator and inquires about Bobby's medical history. He wants to know if Bobby has any immunosuppressive disorders, making Emily wonder what that has to do with his injury. However, instead of explaining, the doctor says he doesn't have time to go over every little detail. Emily then reveals that she did go to medical school, but dropped out after her first year. So Dr. Benway encourages Emily to go back to medical school, before telling her that the nurse will inform her if he has more questions. Meanwhile, Jude impatiently calls for the nurse in the lobby, but when she doesn't show up, he decides to look for the men's room. Moments later, Nurse Marian exits one of the rooms, surprised to find that Jude left. In the men's room, Scott finds Jude smoking an illegal substance. Scott tells Jude to get rid of it, and he'll give him something better. Scott then shows Jude the dispensary with various medicines in a nitrous tank, and as Jude observes the room, he notices that some of them have not been approved by the FDA yet. However, Scott allows him to have some before they exit the room. Desperate to see her boyfriend, Emily exits the elevator on the 2nd floor instead. As Emily searches for the recovery wing, she encounters a patient standing at the end of a hallway. Emily asks if the patient needs a nurse or a doctor, but she answers that none of them would help her. In the lobby, Nurse Marion directs Dimitri to an exam room, leaving Claire to wait for her turn. Dimitri arrives in the designated exam room, but the doctor is nowhere in sight. Then, he notices blood pooling on the floor from behind a closed curtain, and he is appalled to see a man whose bloody chest is open on the examination table. Suddenly, Travis comes up behind Dimitri and injects him with a sedative. Meanwhile, Scott locks Jude in a room with the excuse of showing him the lounge. Jude pounds on the door, demanding to be let out. But when Scott doesn't respond, he surveys the room and realizes he's in a morgue. Later on, Jude begins to hallucinate, while Scott entertains himself by watching him through the security camera. Dimitri regains consciousness as he gets taken into an operating room, where Dr. Benway tells him that he will not be okay. Dr. Benway then proceeds to harvest his organs with Travis' assistance. On the other hand, Claire hears the telephone on the abandoned nurse's desk ringing, so she goes to pick it up. Claire then hears a weak voice asking for help, and since she is worried that someone might need assistance, she searches for the patient. Claire finds the patient moments later, but while she's approaching him, a naked man suddenly tackles her to the ground. Claire struggles to push the man away as his insides spill out from a cut in his torso. Traumatized by the experience, Claire runs into the hallway, only to get knocked out and dragged away by Travis. Emily's search for her boyfriend comes to a halt when Nurse Marion intentionally runs into her and takes her to an exam room for a checkup. She's observing Dr. Benway's credentials and achievements mounted on the wall when the man himself walks up behind her. Dr. Benway proceeds to examine her while relaying the story of how his wife got diagnosed with terminal cancer, but is now making a miraculous recovery through experimental treatment. Dr. Benway then asks Emily to remove her shirt and lie in the examination bed in a fetal position for a lumbar puncture. After Dr. Benway collects Emily's spinal fluid, he drinks a small portion of it without her knowledge. Sensing that something isn't right, Emily asks Dr. Benway to inform Bobby's parents of his condition. Dr. Benway then says that he just talked to them an hour ago, even though Emily didn't put any emergency contact info in Bobby's chart. As Emily is about to exit the room, she realizes that Dr. Benway locked it upon leaving, so Emily finds a sharp object to open the door. Meanwhile, Travis is hitting the back of Claire's head with a hammer when Scott walks in, saying that Dr. Benway wants to examine her. After breaking out of the exam room, Emily wanders around and finds a records room with live security footage of Jude in the morgue. Once Emily finds the right key for the room, she unlocks the morgue to see Jude cutting his forearm. Emily then tells Jude that he is hallucinating while wrapping a bandage around his forearm. When Emily and Jude leave the morgue to search for their friends, they come across Nurse Marion and Dr. Benway talking in another exam room. Emily and Jude quickly hide in the nearest room and watch as Dr. Benway examines a non-responsive Claire. Dr. Benway scolds Nurse Marion for what Travis did to Claire, so the nurse assures him that she will take care of the problem, also reminding him that they still have 2 more hosts to use. Although Emily's surprised to hear that, she remains quiet with Jude and waits for Dr. Benway and Nurse Marion to leave. With Dr. Benway and Nurse Marion out of sight, Emily and Jude go to Claire to help her. Unfortunately, they find that Claire's skull has been cracked open and her brain removed. Emily and Jude then lay her down before placing a sheet over her. Fed up, Jude looks for a way out of the hospital, leaving Emily alone to find Bobby. In Emily's search, she comes across Scott using a sander to remove the fingerprints of a severed hand and sees a phone on the table behind him. Emily sneaks behind him and successfully grabs the phone before running to the records room, where she calls 911. However, Travis unexpectedly walks into the room. Meanwhile, Dr. Benway and Nurse Marion enter Emily's previous exam room, only to find her missing. Enraged, Dr. Benway pins Nurse Marion against the wall and orders her to find Emily. While Emily hides under the desk, the cell phone suddenly starts ringing, so she places it on the floor away from her hiding spot, where Travis eventually finds it. Emily hears Travis talking to Nurse Marion while he opens and closes the door. Thinking that Travis left, Emily crawls out of her hiding spot, only for Travis to grab her from behind. Emily then stabs his thigh and runs for the lobby, but Travis eventually catches up to her, and they find a police officer at the door. Before opening the door, Travis warns Emily not to do anything stupid. Travis then lets the officer in and answers his questions about the hospital, and despite his warning, Emily tells the officer that they're killing people. Emily also leads the officer to the exam room where Claire was, but it's already empty. Because of that, the officer believes that Emily is a patient in the psychiatric ward and prepares to leave, ignoring her protests. However, as they walk in the hallway, they suddenly come across Scott with a cart full of severed body parts. The police officer is about to reach for his gun when all of a sudden, Dr. Benway stabs him behind the neck. Dr. Benway is furious that things got out of hand, so Scott tries to calm him down by saying he'll take care of the body in the patrol car. Satisfied with Scott's answer, Dr. Benway orders Travis to take Emily to the operating room, where Nurse Marion will prepare her for surgery. Moments later, Dr. Benway tries drilling into Emily's skull in the operating room, only for the drill to break. Frustrated, Dr. Benway orders Nurse Marion to get him an electric drill instead, and leaves Emily to Travis while he talks to his wife. Travis then silences Emily by slapping her and punching her in the gut, causing her to throw up. Using her vomit, Emily slips out of her handcuffs and quickly grabs a pair of scissors to stab Travis. Despite that, Travis still tries to fight back, but Emily picks up a medical gas cylinder and hits him repeatedly with it until he dies. On the other hand, while Jude is looking for an exit, he finds a patient with blood dripping from her mouth. As Emily searches for her boyfriend, she finds Dr. Benway talking to his wife, Lizette. Dr. Benway then turns to see Emily making a run for the elevator and follows her. Emily frantically presses the elevator buttons, waiting for the elevator door to open, only for Scott to catch her. While Scott and Dr. Benway discuss what to do with Emily, Jude nonchalantly walks past them. Emily then hits Scott with her elbow and runs after Jude. Jude and Emily hurry down the stairs and lock themselves in a dispensary, while Scott and Dr. Benway try to find the right key to open the door. Then, Jude sees the nitrous tank and pushes Emily through a different door that leads to another hallway, ordering her to run despite her protests. Once he's alone, Jude turns the tank's valve, and just as Scott opens the door, Jude uses his lighter to cause an explosion. Devastated but determined to get away, Emily goes to Lizette's room and follows the green tube attached to her. Emily then finds herself in a different room, where Bobby lies on the table, his chest cut open and organs suspended on strings. Out of breath, Bobby tells Emily he wants to escape the place with her, but she knows that he won't survive. So Emily instructs Bobby to close his eyes and think of happy memories while turning off his life support to end his suffering. However, turning off Bobby's life support not only kills him, but also stops the support connected to Lizette's body, making her struggle to breathe. As Emily leaves the room, an angry Nurse Marion tries attacking her with a butcher's knife. In their struggle, Emily grabs the knife and uses it to cut off Nurse Marion's arm, leaving her to bleed out. Moments later, Emily enters Lizette's room after hearing her voice. Emily blames Lizette for everything that happened, ignoring her as she begs for help. However, Lizette looks behind Emily and starts laughing uncontrollably, confusing Emily. Emily then looks behind her to see Dr. Benway staring at them with severe burns due to the explosion. Enraged, Emily stabs Lizette in the face, instantly killing her, and turns to Dr. Benway. Unfortunately, Dr. Benway disarms Emily and holds her by the neck, pinning her against the wall before throwing her to a nearby table. Dr. Benway then lifts Emily and places her on another table to strangle her, and as if that isn't enough, he cuts her face with a scalpel. Refusing to die in that hospital, Emily knees Dr. Benway and repeatedly stabs the exposed part of his face with a needle. Later on, Emily sits in front of a mirror, stitching the cut on her face as Dr. Benway regains consciousness and tries to escape behind her.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.